Now, you describe beautifully what they are missing. They are missing 90% of the news. But why is there international intelligentsia? It happens to be mostly in the humanities and social sciences. Physicists, for example, tend to be quite different. The universe is so mysterious. It's very difficult to be a real secularist ideology when you're dealing with the galaxies, it seems. But it has become a culture which goes right back to the Enlightenment. It's an elite culture. The Enlightenment created an elite which believed itself to be free of all superstitions, free especially of the superstitions of Christianity, and they were the future, the enlightened future. Well, the future didn't turn out to be all that enlightened. So this faith in pure reason and enlightenment has gotten through some severe shocks, which is healthy. Doesn't mean we should try to get rid of everything the Enlightenment created, not at all. But people should have doubts. Speaking in Cambridge, Massachusetts, there's that wonderful book, I forget the name of the author, about this group of philosophers at Harvard around William James. What was it called? The Metaphysics Club, something like that. And there was the one guy who, Oliver Wendell Holmes, who went into the Civil War as an officer in the Union Army, and he was so appalled by the cruelty on both sides and the absolute convictions that people had, where he came back and showed in his, when he became a justice of the Supreme Court, he had a terrible suspicion of all certainties. Certainty kills. And that doesn't mean you can't believe in anything. That means always have a little bit of doubt. It's healthy. Don't be absolutely sure. Have faith, but don't be sure. Don't think you're certain. I resonate with that.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I'm always a little bit surprised at the sort of persistence of secularism among, I guess I can say, since we're in Harvard University, our fellow elites, just because it strikes me as, well, in particular, the marriage of sort of a benevolent, liberal, human rights-based universalism with a godless, essentially meaningless cosmos seems to me a combination that, you know, is possible to sustain, obviously, but suggests some real tensions, right, between, you know, and those tensions, I think, were brought out in many ways in the late 19th and early 20th century in sort of ultimately fairly horrifying ways in Western Europe. But since then, it feels like people have sort of said, well, you know, we saw where sort of total de-Christianization could go in certain ways in Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. So we don't want to go that far, but we're going to keep our sort of, you know, not atheistic, but pretty agnostic view of the world, but we're also going to hold on to a sort of Christian-ish, religion-influenced view of human dignity and human rights. And we've sort of stayed there for a while. And yeah, I'm sort of surprised at that. I'm surprised that there aren't that many sort of new religion-inflected, religion-influenced movements within the intelligentsia. And I guess I'm not surprised that traditional Christianity or traditional Western monotheism is particularly unpopular with the intelligentsia right now, because the message of the New Testament on not only issues of sort of wealth and power, but since the sexual revolution, especially issues of sexual morality, cuts very strongly against the kind of, you know, it cuts against the modern lifestyle in many different ways, but it cuts particularly strongly against the lifestyle and freedoms that our sort of globalized elite takes for granted as their birthright. And so I'm not surprised that there's sort of this default assumption at places like Harvard and elsewhere that, you know, traditional religion is backward because it doesn't want you to, you know, have as much fun, basically, as a truly liberated person should be having. But I am surprised that there aren't more, for instance, deists and pantheists in the secular elite. And there sort of are. I mean, I think if you scratch the surface of some allegedly secular people, they would be functionally pantheist or something, but they would say, there's some sort of purpose or meaning in the universe, even if I don't understand it. But I'm just surprised that hasn't taken on a fuller form, that there isn't more intellectual interest in it. I don't know if any of you guys followed the controversy around this book Thomas Nagel, the philosopher at Columbia, wrote, called Mind and Cosmos, that was sort of a critique of the sort of materialist paradigm in philosophy and science. And I'm a Catholic Christian, I'm obviously biased, but I thought it was had some problems and issues, but it seemed like a pretty compelling critique, and not a critique, Nagel's not a Christian, it's not a critique that requires that you put it down and take up any kind of traditional religion, but it's a critique that I think would naturally point well-educated people towards some sort of slightly different conception of the universe. But we haven't gotten there yet, and it's sort of an interesting question how long this sort of post-Second World War kind of dynamic of alleged materialist cosmos over here and human rights and human dignity over there can keep moving. I don't know.
Oh, you've got to go home now. Okay, go ahead. Thanks for joining us.